Well, hello, friends and foes. Anyway, I've done my little things for my grandchildren and other children, anybody's children who like stories. Now we get into the serious stuff. This is our wonderful friend who he's threatened with being cut off completely. Well, we'll take up the what is it when you're in a race? The flame, you know. The Olympics flame for Coleman Cuts the Mustard by Vernon Coleman, published by David Albert Yeats. So we're going to continue, but it's some time since I've read this. I've had some interruptions, so I'll just read a little bit that I've read in the last one so we haven't lost the plot. Well, I've always lost it anyway. If you wanted to do this, something to do with receivers and transmitters, someone very rich to start with, someone with loads of money and contacts, a billionaire really, and someone without much in the way of morals, you would need something to inject into people, a medicine of some kind, for example, and then you'd need someone good at software to help with all the transmitting and the receiving, and you would need people with access to lots of tall poles, this is obviously 5G, and roofs where they could put the transmitter things, but none of that would be any good unless you had a reason for injecting people. You can't just go around injecting millions, and I would say billions, of people for no reason. Ideally, you would need them all to be frightened of something so that they were keen to let you inject them. And then you could put your tiny receivers into the stuff that was being injected or squirted up their noses or whatever. That would be a tricky thing to organise because you would ideally need a threat of some kind. Get in the big picture? They're all frightened of catching COVID-19, aren't they? Or they can't wait to take a vaccine so they don't realise that it'll be the vaccine that kills them. You could tell everyone that they were going to get the plague or something if they didn't let you give them their wonderful antidote in this vaccination against COVID-19. The biggest hoax of the century, the biggest lie of the century worldwide, never mind about just UK. Everywhere, everyone's scared. Oh, they jump off the pavement, they get out of the way. Oh, they see you without a mask, they don't know what to do. Nobody's told them. They've all been told to keep wearing them. Sorry, that might work. But for that you would need to have a really big scare about something. And that would not be possible because you would need some experts to say that there was a big scare coming when really there wasn't. So they would have to make up something or find something and then exaggerate it, just like they do in those wretched adverts that I don't watch. Or you would find someone not very good at what they did and get them to make a forecast that terrified the life out of everyone, and then you would have to keep people really scared, just like in those fairy stories I've just been reading for my grandchildren, scaring them. I didn't do much scaring today, but I'll find some and scare them another day. You could, I suppose, make them so scared that they were happy to put up all sorts of rules and restrictions, and you could tell people that if they didn't do what you told them to do, then the scary thing was going to get worse than ever. And you would need experts and advisors who had links to the companies, the pharmaceutical companies making the stuff you were planning to give people. And you would have to promise them all sorts of things, i.e. money and goods and all sorts of lies. Yeah. And you would have to promise them all sorts of things, and you probably need some greedy and compliant politicians too. So it really would not be possible to arrange all that. And anyway, there's another problem, because you would need to keep people separated. So you can't have them communicating and talking and discussing it and saying, do you think this is true? This is true. So they're keeping us away from all our old relatives locked up in care homes, and only one child out of 3 or so to visit. Well, I've never heard such flipping nonsense in all my life. Back to this. So you could make sure the messages you were transmitting reached the individual receivers, the brainwashing. You would have to have people standing several feet apart all the time. There's no way that people would do that. So it couldn't possibly work, could it? That's why they brought in these things of distancing, social distancing, to make them stay apart. Even if that is what someone wanted to do. How many coincidences make a conspiracy? Is Bill Gates the most dangerous man on the planet? Is this the final solution? Only my age group understand that terminology. It's something to do with the Nazis in the last war, when they had determined to murder every Jew upon earth, I think. In the old days, when you went to the theatre, the orchestra would play a bit of music before the main play or opera started. It was called an overture. Well, you will be relieved to hear that I'm not going to play music, because I don't have my harmonica with me. But in order to help keep this video online for as long as possible, I am going into the realm of high-tech information technology again. Ever since this fake crisis began, doctors and governments have been pushing us all in a single direction. These are not my words, they are those of Dr. Vernon Coleman, and I'm continuing to record them because they've really come close. They take that as fast as he puts up his videos, they take them down. So these are his words, they're not Janet's words, they're his. Okay, continue. Once again, much of the information relates to the UK, but it is, I think, valid for just about every country on the planet. And it is fair to say that the global medical profession has barely covered itself in glory during the last few months. Well, I'd have said it covered itself with what goes down the drains. Mud and rubbish and disgusting, manure. It is difficult to avoid the suspicion that everything that has been done has been directed towards preparing nations everywhere for mass mandatory vaccination programs. I'll cut in here, and when you are asked to have a vaccination, anybody, any of you must say to the doctor, not the nurses and the practitioners, you don't let them near you. You say to the doctor, I want to know what's in this, but even though you might tell me, I want you to give me in writing now that if there's anything harmful in this and anything happens to me, my family, my children, I'm suing you personally. I want you to sign a letter telling me in that letter that it's categorically safe and nothing bad will happen to me. If the doctor who is responsible for your injection refuses you to give it in writing with his signature in front of you, refuse to have the vaccination, especially if it's going to be forced on people. Get them to sign, type something up before you go to the doctor and make him sign it in front of you. That's what I would do, because I'm not having one. I am not having one. Never, 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 never. Tie me up and hang me up first. But for you nice people who don't rant and rave and carry on alarmingly, get your paper prepared. Get someone to type it up. If you can't type yourself, type up what you want him to sign, because you can't trust his wording. Do your own wording. Even go to a solicitor and get a documented proper one. What they do, pay £15, they'll soon type you a letter up. All right, get back to Dr. Coleman's words. Okay, I lost my place. It is fair to say that the global medical profession has hardly covered itself in glory, said that already, during the last few months. It is difficult to avoid the suspicion that everything has been directed towards preparing nations everywhere for mass, mandatory vaccination programs. It seems that nothing else matters, and it seems that the vaccination is being done not to protect but to control, and I'd add kill. Just the other day, the New York State Bar Association said it should be mandatory for all Americans to have a COVID-19 vaccination, including those who don't want it, for religious, that's me, philosophical, personal reasons, that's me. They don't give medical reasons as an exclusion possibility, but they presumably would not allow that as a let-out either. We're not communists. We believe in God, and God heals us. We're not going to be told what to do by a load of communists. Now, I don't know about you, but I am a bit wary about being given medical, religious and philosophical instructions from a bunch of lawyers. Amen! Amen to that, Vernon Coleman. I support you. I just hope the American and British public feel the same way. Let the lawyers have the jabs if they want them. In the UK, it was pretty obvious back on the 3rd of March 2020 when the government introduced its coronavirus action plan that its focus was fixed firmly on the development and distribution of vaccines. It was all in the plan. They must think we're stupid. They must think we're all dum-dums in England. Well, we're not. A lot of nonsense has been spoken since then, and some strange things have been happening. As I mentioned in another video, I know of at least one doctor who has been struck off the medical register for 12 months no less, for daring to question the coronavirus story. Well done, anonymous doctor, whoever you are. Shake you by the hand. They cannot strike me off the medical register because I'm no longer on it. The GMC introduced a complicated and stupid but doubtless profitable scheme which pretty well ensures that retired doctors cannot retain a medical license. What a load of crap. You've probably got more sense than those that are still on the list. There have been a good many coincidences recently. I want to tell you about just a few that I have noticed. For example, I was astonished when I saw a fuss being made the other day about using a simple, cheap steroid to help with the breathing problems suffered by coronavirus patients. When I first started wielding a stethoscope in anger, it was commonplace to use steroids for breathing problems. My dad had them when he had leukemia. That was to help the cancer of the blood. The white cells were eating up all the red. So steroids have been used for a long time. My dad died 19th of December 1973 from the leukemia, but he got pneumonia and that finished him off. But yeah, steroids, they are important at times. Where was the surprise in this? I will answer you that if you haven't already beaten me to it. The surprise was that a drug company controlled government actually dared admit that a cheap, readily available drug might be a good remedy for the coronavirus and mean that the over-promoted jabs might not be necessary after all. They have been so desperately promoting the vaccine they want to sell that the governments and the medical establishment everywhere have suppressed or demonized cheap and effective remedies. But eventually, the good old steroid broke through and got an honourable mention. Here is another astonishing story. You will have no doubt heard of hydroxychloroquine, the drug that Donald Trump has been taking to help keep him free of coronavirus. Hydroxychloroquine has been used for years, and early research showed it was very useful. You might think that governments everywhere might have been excited by this. Not a bit. Eminent researchers who had shown that the drug was incredibly useful at preventing COVID-19 were attacked by the media, who said it was dangerous. Are they medics? Have they been to university and all these places where they train doctors in hospitals? Have they got a degree? They were told it was dangerous by politicians who had heard it from a bloke who doubtless gave them the news in a brown envelope. The WHO didn't want any trials. The French government suddenly classified it as a poison. In the UK, government agencies did not want any clinical trials. They all wanted to concentrate on the vaccine. How much were they paid to keep concentrating on the COVID-19 vaccine? There were many demands for some tests, and eventually work was done by researchers who had funding from a bloke called Gates. Sounds like we know him. And before you could whisper the word conspiracy, a comic called The Lancet published a study which claimed that the drug could cause nasty side effects such as heart trouble and death. And so the research was immediately stopped. Phew! Thought the vaccine lovers that was a close one. But then doctors around the world flooded the Lancet with letters and no doubt emails and so on, pointing out that the research they had published was so badly flawed that it was, useless and dangerous. The research, by the way, had allegedly, and in my view, rather bizarrely, been based on some mathematical modelling, and you will have heard that phrase before. Other research done responsibly showed that hydroxychloroquine worked well, cutting the risk of infection by 80% in people who did not have the coronavirus. No wonder Donald Trump was taking it. What a pity residents in care homes were not given it. Thousands of them would still be alive. The drug is as cheap as chips. I'm not sure that they're cheap because it's been around forever. and is out of patent, so nobody can make any money on it, so they don't want to give it. Yet if it saves life, if you want to know the details of the crappy research that the Lancet published, I recommend that you go to the excellent UK column website, where there is a brilliant article by Ian Davis detailing exactly what was done. Eventually, the Lancet withdrew the paper, blaming the researchers instead of taking responsibility for publishing the rubbish. Now, by another of those astonishing coincidences with which we are becoming familiar these days, when it comes to vaccines and vaccinations, I cannot think of any medical journal which has quite the enthusiasm of the Lancet for encouraging doctors to stick needles into people and pump drugs and chemicals into their bodies. In March 2019, an editorial in the Lancet reported that parents who refuse to have their children vaccinated, and you should, are often required to attend a course on the risks of not vaccinating their pet children. They did not suggest, though, it would have made far more sense to me that those who have their children vaccinated should be required to attend a course on the risks of vaccinating their children. I agree with that. My own philosophical belief is that parents who have their children vaccinated are guilty of child abuse and should be charged accordingly. I recognise that this is not a view widely held within the medical profession. Well, it should be. Children have their own immune system created by God. They don't need vaccinations more than what they've already had up to the age they are, whatever they are. Don't have any more, you can't trust them. It is, I think, worth pointing out that the Lancet is a commercial journal which makes a good deal of money from advertising. The last time I looked, a full-page advert in the Lancet could cost over £10,000. And who buys the advertising? Well, if you guess, the most of it was paid for by the drug companies, then you probably would not be far off the mark. And who makes the vaccines? Well, drug companies, of course. Am I being unfair in fearing that there could be a conflict of interest here? Let's call it a coincidence. So, anyway, that is the story of hydroxychloroquine queen, a cheap, readily available, but out of patent drug. Was available and far, far more useful than a jabby thing, but serious attempts were made to block its use. I wonder why. This whole story gets more staggering by the minute, and I confess that sorting it out is rather like sitting on a swing and trying to do a jigsaw with your eyes shut. However, I have put together a lot of the facts and gathered together some more curious coincidences. For example, at one point, The WHO announced that people who had had the coronavirus would not be immune and would still need the vaccine. No one ever tried to explain how stuff for a disease could provide immunity if the disease itself could not provide immunity. But it was also suggested that we might all need to have 2 doses or possibly an annual dose to keep us topped up. Boy, wouldn't that bring in the billions. Greedy evil bastards. But we must not be cynical about this, nor must we be cynical about the fact that the drug companies appear to be negotiating zero liability for themselves. No. If you're going to force vaccines, we should have a say in that. No. They are liable. They should be liable and will be to eternity. Evil so-and-sos. Nor must we be cynical about the fact that the drug companies appear to be negotiating zero liabilities for themselves. I've had to say it twice. It's shocking. In other words, if some vaccine should kill or maim, then the company would not be responsible. That's why I read it twice. It's unbelievable. I do not think that has ever happened before in any sphere of human activity. Well, whoever allows that wants shooting or hanging, executing. By coincidence, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation give more money to the WHO than the British government. Only the American government gives more. Bill Gates, the billionaire software chap and former chum of that Epstein fellow, who might have killed himself and who certainly died in prison, or it was made to look as if he died in prison. How would you ever know? Pretty well controls the WHO. He has tentacles everywhere. In his clear desire to control the world, he looks more and more like a James Bond baddie. Though I think that is being unfair to the James Bond baddies. Incidentally, you might think that if one of the world's greediest and most ruthless men suddenly wanted to save millions of lives, he might build roads in poor countries, set up farms and good water supplies. Those are things which are proven to save lives, but not our Bill. He never did anything good in Jamaica while I lived there for 10 years. Nothing. Gates is, it seems, obsessed with vaccinating everyone on the earth. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has its disgustingly filthy fingerprints all over everything. By the way, Gates and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson have been speaking a good deal recently, and at a vaccine summit which raised $7 billion to spend on vaccinating 300 million children, Comrade Boris handed over 1.65 billion of UK taxpayers' money, making the UK the biggest donor. He never had our permission to do that. Boris, who has apparently acquired medical qualifications since we last heard from him, said that up to 8 million lives would be saved, but he didn't mention how many children would be killed or brain damaged, and he did not say how he knew that 8 million lives would be saved. But these rash judgments seem to come easily to anyone who has dealings with Mr. Gates, probably impressed by all the money that Bill Gates has to his disposal. Maybe it's some sort of infection. Maybe someone could invent stuff to stop it. One thing you should know, Gates has for years argued that the world is overpopulated. Not in God's eyes, it's not. He wants every one of us who's conceived to be born and live to the age that is normal to die. He reckons that if you vaccinate people, then the world's population will fall. Well, that means he knows he's put a killing thing in it then. I don't think there is any scientific evidence for Mr. Gates's claim, which I would describe as baloney, absolute tosh and baloney. And I'm going to stop there. That's long enough for now. 30 minutes of, I hope I didn't read it too boringly. I'll start again in a minute. I'll have a little drink of something. So alright, it's been nice doing that bit. I'm glad to be back reading you, Dr. Vernon. You're the best in the world. God bless you and protect you from all them horrible people who hate your guts. We don't, we love you.